Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support keeps these Wild West tales riding on. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, maybe Tucson, Cheyenne, or Kansas City. I love hearing just how far these stories roam. Dust rolled low across the prairie, curling around the fence posts like a restless spirit. The light was thin, filtered through a sky that could not decide between sun and shadow. Elias Crow stood at the hinge of his weathered barn door, working a stubborn latch with the slow precision of a man who had long ago stopped hurrying for anyone. His hands bore the story of 35 years, rope burns, faint scars, a strength that came from solitude rather than pride. For most men, the land was a place to build a future. For Elias, it was a graveyard for what had already been lost. He had buried his hunger for company beneath these acres, under the wind that never quit, in the quiet where no voice but his own dared to linger. In town, they said he was cursed, that no woman should ever find herself under his roof. He never argued. Let them speak. Gossip kept people away better than fences ever could. That afternoon, the wind shifted. It brought with it a sound, faint, broken, something more human than the cry of a hawk. Elias straightened, every sense sharpening. The sound came again, weaker this time, carried on the lazy drift of dust from the southern pasture. He left the latch half-mended and followed the noise, boots crunching over dry earth. The sight stopped him cold. Against the sun-bleached wall of his barn lay a woman. She was slumped sideways, her dress, a light shade of violet, torn at the hem and dusted over from travel. Long, wavy brown hair clung to her temples, and one bare foot was streaked with fresh blood that had darkened to rust where it touched the date. Her head tilted back against the boards, eyes half shut, lips parted as though she had run out of strength mid-breath. Elias knelt beside her. His shadow spilled over her like a dark quilt, and for a moment he only looked. It had been decades since he'd been this close to a woman, and the sight unsettled him in a way he wasn't prepared for. His hand hovered above her ankle, the heat of her skin reaching him before his fingertips made contact. When he did touch her, he felt the tremor, not just in her, but in himself. Her breathing was shallow, quickened more by pain than fear. The blood on her foot had come from a jagged gash just below the ankle, raw and red against her pale skin. Elias's chest tightened. He was no doctor, but he knew enough to see it needed cleaning, maybe stitches. "You hear me?" His voice came low, careful, as if words might shatter her entirely. Her eyelids lifted just enough to catch the glint of his face in the failing light. She didn't answer, but her fingers curled faintly, like she was trying to hold onto something invisible. He slid his arms beneath her, feeling the weight of her, lighter than she should have been, as if she'd been walking too far with too little in her. When he lifted her, her head fell against his shoulder, the scent of dust and sage from her dress brushing up old, buried memories. Halfway to the cabin, he paused. Town was only a mile east, and there were people there who could help her better than he could. But then he remembered the eyes that always followed him in that place, how Deputy Tanner's voice had once carried far enough for others to hear. Crow's trouble. Ain't no woman safe on his land. The thought of those same voices speaking over this woman while she lay helpless twisted something inside him. He adjusted his hold on her, and kept walking, away from the road and toward the cabin. Inside, the air was cool and dim. He set her on the narrow bed in the corner, the one he hadn't touched since the day he lost his wife. For years it had been nothing more than a place to store old blankets. Now, it felt like trespass to see someone lying there again. He fetched a basin, filled it with water from the pump, and brought it to her side. She stowed as he knelt, the lamplight catching in her eyes for the first time. They were the color of a storm just before rain. Her lips parted, and the sound she made was barely more than breath. "Why, help me." Elias froze, the cloth in his hand dripping water onto the floor. He searched her face, but found no mockery there, only exhaustion and the faint shadow of fear. The answer didn't come easy. He wasn't even sure what it was yet. "Don't rightly know," he said at last. Her eyes closed again, and the room went quiet except for the slow drip of water from the cloth, hitting the boards like the ticking of a far-off clock. Outside, the wind pressed against the cabin walls, carrying the scent of rain that never seemed to come. Morning slipped in through the cabin window in long, soft bars of light, cutting through the dust that drifted lazily in the air. The night had been silent but for the low sigh of the wind against the walls, and Elias had kept to his chair in the corner, watching the slow rise and fall of the woman's chest. She hadn't woken. He'd told himself it was only to make sure she breathed, but his eyes had lingered longer than necessity required. When she stirred at last, he was at her side with the basin, steam curling upward from the warmed water. She tensed when he reached for her injured foot, but did not pull away. He dipped the cloth, squeezed it out, and began to clean the wound with the patience of a man who knew pain well. She winced, her knuckles tightening in the quilt, yet kept still. "You'll walk again," he said, voice quiet enough to blend with the sound of dripping water. She studied him for a moment, as though weighing whether to trust the words. "Margaret," she said at last, her voice raw. "Maggie, if it suits." He nodded once. "Elias." The names hung between them like an unspoken pact. By midday she was strong enough to sit up, though her foot still throbbed. Elias left a plate of bread and cold venison on the table. She ate slowly, her gaze drawn to the window as if measuring the distance to something far beyond it. "They'll come looking," she murmured. "Who?" She didn't answer right away. Her fingers smoothed a fold in the blanket, the motion small but deliberate. "A man I left behind," she said finally. "One who doesn't take kindly to being left." Her eyes flicked to his. "He's not the sort to ask twice." Elias said nothing. The words told him enough. That afternoon, the quiet broke. Hoofbeats echoed faintly through the dry air, the sound carried in from the south. Elias stepped out to the porch, scanning the horizon. A lone rider approached, dark against the pale dust, moving slow enough to be deliberate. The man reined in near the barn. He was broad-shouldered, his face shadowed beneath the brim of a hat that had seen better days. "Looking for a woman," he called, voice edged with the kind of confidence that came from winning too many fights. "Name's Maggie Sinclair. Pass this way." Elias stayed on the porch, one hand resting lightly on the rail. "Ain't seen her." The man's eyes narrowed. "If you do, tell her she's got business left unfinished." He spat in the dote, wheeled his horse, and rode back the way he'd come. When Elias returned inside, Maggie's face was pale. She'd heard every word. "He'll be back," she whispered. That night the wind carried the smell of dry mesquite and something sharper, anticipation. Elias kept the lamp low, the shadows deep. He sat by the door, revolver resting across his knee, the weight of it both familiar and unwanted. Maggie lay in the bed, eyes open to the dark, her breath measured but not quite calm. The hoofbeats came again, closer this time, their rhythm steady as a heartbeat. The barn door creaked open. Elias rose without haste, stepping out into the moonlight where the drifter stood, pistol already drawn. "You lied to me," the man said. Elias didn't answer. The space between them felt like dry tinder, waiting for the spark. The drifter took a step forward. Leather straps creaked. The faint rasp of his breathing cut through the night. In one smooth motion, Elias swatted the pistol aside, the shot going wide into the dark. His fist connected with the man's jaw, the sound sharp as a splitting log. The drifter hit the dote hard, groaning, dazed. Elias wrenched the gun from his hand and kicked it aside. He tied the man's wrists with a length of rope from the barn wall, dragging him to the fence post and securing him there. The law could have him come morning. When Elias stepped back into the cabin, Maggie was sitting up, the lamplight pooling in her eyes. "You didn't have to," she said softly. "Maybe I did." Her gaze held his for a long moment. "Then you know why you helped me." Elias didn't speak, but the answer was already in the air between them, heavy and certain. Outside, the wind eased, carrying away the last trace of hoofbeats into the night.